Hello and welcome. Happy Halloween, everyone. Happy Halloween. Impromptu live stream yet again. To celebrate this spookiest time of the year, I'm going to be doing a dramatic reading of the famous, if not infamous, sample chapter from The Winds of Winter. So for those who don't know, let me take these out. Had my headphones in. For those who don't know, there's a variety of sample chapters that George has made public. There's recordings of them, of George reading them out at cons and so on, and people have transcribed them. And whether they'll be in the eventual Winds of Winter, don't know. They could be scrapped, they could be edited, so technically they're non-canon. But of all of these sample chapters, the one that people rave about the most is The Forsaken. Arguably one of the creepiest chapters in the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire, and I believe it's my good friend Quinn the GM's favourite chapter in the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire. So I thought I did want to do more spooky streams this month, but I've been very busy with every fray. So I'll just do this cheeky one, a dramatic reading. I'll wait for more people to come in. While people are coming in, I'll give you a quick rundown on what's going on with the channel. So, oh, and also this will be once I've done the reading, there'll be a Q&A at the end. So basically, while I'm going through this chapter, feel free to send in questions. You can do it via super chats through YouTube, or you can go into the description and click on the Streamlabs link. That's the same thing that Alt-Shift-X has. If you donate via Streamlabs, that means 100% of the money you're sending goes to me and there's not a percentage snatched up by YouTube. So that's up to you. But donations and super chats, send in questions or theories or whatever you want, and I'll be answering those in a Q&A. But that's at the very end. That'll be after the reading. So yeah, it'll probably won't be the longest live stream ever. It'll probably be a short little live stream. Although I always say that and it ends up being 3.5 hours. So there we go. And of course, if you don't want to listen to this sample chapter for whatever reason, if you want to be a complete Winds purist and not know anything, a complete Winds virgin, go ahead. But yes, in terms of the channel, before we officially begin, I'm still working on every fray. Obviously, it's a big one. The audio is currently 40 minutes long, and I've done about 3 minutes of animation, and it took a lot of effort to do those 3 minutes because even though I don't have particularly complex animation, right, it's just assets moving from A to B, there's a lot of assets, there's a lot of movement, and I want motion every second of the video, so it's pretty hard. So I need to find a way to be faster, because obviously I can't afford to spend like months on this video, but I want it to be perfect. So yeah, 40-minute fray video will come in the future. I'm going to work my ass off over the next few weeks and try and get this done. Then when I've released it, my magnum opus, I'm going to reform the channel. I'm going to reform the channel and find a way to produce quicker and faster content for everyone and sort of professionalize and all that kind of thing. Regular live streams and so on. And that's all coming after every fray explained. So that'll be fun. And I want to shout out my Patreons. Thank you so much for the support. I wouldn't be able to basically be taking a break from shorter videos to work on this big video. I wouldn't be able to do that without my Patreon support. So thank you so much for allowing this channel to literally continue. You guys are awesome. And if you're interested in joining that, links in the description. Just do stop motion like old school South Park. What with the what's it called, construction paper. That would take longer. I think that would literally take longer than just using keyframes in DaVinci Resolve. But there we go. I'm gonna sell out one day and be a slideshow channel like Quinn the GM. I'll be a millionaire in a month, I promise you. Okay, people have flocked in. Let me just sort something out in my study, and then we'll begin. And like I said, send in some questions, send in some super chats and donations, and at the end we can have a great Q&A going. It doesn't have to be Halloween or spooky. These could be A Song of Ice and Fire questions. They can be beyond A Song of Ice and Fire, just fantasy in general, media, anything, literally anything. But yeah, let me just sort something out. Okay. There we go. Just keeping hydrated. I've turned into a lemon water guy recently. So as you know from my I did that the cooking video, which took too long, by the way. Like, I wanted it to be like I spend a few days on it, and the next thing I know, it turned into like a 2-week project, which is ridiculous. But not many people watched it. But like, it's become a fun niche video for the hardcore fans, and people seem to really enjoy it. But there's a bit in the Patreon exclusive cooking video where I bake some lemon cakes, right? Some Sansa style lemon cakes, where like I lick a lemon for a joke, and I found it really tasty. So I think I have a deficiency because I kept licking it, being like, yo, this is sour, this is kind of nice. So now I've just got slices of lemon in my water since then, every single day. Oh man, I love it. I'll get you that, what is it, vitamin C perhaps? Okay. I see super chats rolling in, thanks so much, but like I said, I'll answer them at the end. So I think, grab your drinks, grab your popcorn, it's time for a dramatic reading of The Forsaken. The piece of art that's on the screen is by the Redditor Frank's Reign. I'll put the link in the description once I'm done. They posted it on r/imaginary Westeros, so shout out to Frank's Reign. But here we go. The Forsaken. I should get some dramatic music. It's a bit late for that. I also don't get any copyright strikes. Anyway. Ahem. The Winds of Winter. Aeron 1. The Forsaken. It was always midnight in the belly of the beast. The mutes had robbed him of his robe and shoes and breechclout. He wore hair and chains and scabs. Salt water sloshed around his legs whenever the tide came in, rising as high as his genitals, only to ebb again when the tide receded. His feet had grown huge and soft and puffy, shapeless things as big as hams. He knew that he was in some dungeon, but not where or for how long. There had been another dungeon before this one. In between there had been the ship, the Silence. The night they moved him, he had seen the moon floating on a black wine sea with a leering face that reminded him of Euron. Rats moved in the darkness, swimming through the water. They would bite him as he slept, until he woke, and drove them off with shouts and thrashings. Aeron's beard and scalp crawled with lice and fleas and worms. He could feel them moving through his hair, and the bites itched him intolerably. His chains were so short that he could not reach to scratch. The shackles that bound him to the wall were old and rusted, and his fetters had cut into his wrists. When the tide rushed in to kiss him, the salt got into the wounds and made him gasp. When he slept, the darkness would rise up and swallow him, and then the dream would come, and Uri, and the scream of a rusted hinge. The only light in his wet world came from the lanterns that the visitors brought with them, and it came so seldom that it began to hurt his eyes. A nameless, sour-faced man brought his food, salt beef as hard as wooden shingles, bread crawling with weevils, slimy, stinking fish. Aeron gobbled it down and hoped for more, though oft as not he retched the meal up after. The man who brought the food was dark, dour, mute. His tongue was gone, Aeron did not doubt. That was Euron's way. The light would leave when the mute died, and once again his world would become a damp darkness smelling of grime and mould and feces. Sometimes Euron came himself. Aeron would wake up from sleep, to find his brother standing over him, lantern in hand. Once, aboard the Silence, he hung the lantern from a post and poured them cups of wine. "Drink with me, brother," he said. That night he wore a shirt of iron scales and a cloak of blood-red silk. His eye patch was red leather, his lips blue. "Why am I here?" Aeron croaked at him. His lips were crusty with scabs, his voice hard. "Where are we sailing?" "South. For conquest, plunder, dragons, madness. My place is on the islands." "Your place is where I want you. I am your king." What do you want of me?" "What can you offer me that I have not had before?" Euron smiled. "I left the islands in the hands of old Eric Ironmaker, and sealed his loyalty with the hand of our sweet Asher. I would not have you preaching against his rule, so I took you with us." "Release me! The god commands it!" "Drink with me. Your king commands it." Euron grabbed a handful of the priest's tangled black hair, pulled his head back, and lifted the wine cup to his lips. But what flowed into his mouth was not wine. It was thick and viscous, with a taste that seemed to change with every swallow. Now bitter, now sour, now sweet. When Aeron tried to spit it out, his brother tightened his grip and forced more down his throat. "That's it, priest. Gulp it down. The wine of the warlocks is sweeter than your seawater, with more truth in it than all the gods of the earth." "I curse you," Aeron said when the cup was empty. Liquor dripped from down his chin into a long black beard. If I had the tongue of every man who cursed me, I could make a cloak out of them." Aeron hawked and spat. The spittle struck his brother's cheek and hung there, blue-black, glistening. Euron flicked it off his face with a forefinger, then licked the finger clean. "Your god will come for you tonight. Some god, at least." And when the damp hair slept, sagging in his chains, he heard the creak of a rusted hinge. "Uri!" he cried. There was no hinge here, no door, no Uri. His brother Oregon was long dead, yet there he stood. One arm was black and swollen, stinking with maggots, but he was still Uri, still a boy, no older than the day he died. "You know what waits below the sea, brother?" "The drowned god," Aeron said. "The watery halls." Uri shook his head. Worms await you, Aeron." When he laughed, his face sloughed off, and the priest saw that it was not Uri, but Euron, the smiling eye hidden. He showed the world his blood eye now, dark and terrible. Clad head to heel in a scale of as dark as onyx, he sat upon a mound of blackened skulls, as dwarves capered round his feet, and a forest burned behind him. "The bleeding star bespoke the end," he said to Aeron. "These are the last days, when the world shall be broken and remade. A new god shall be born from the graves and charnel pits." Then Euron lifted a great horn to his lips and blew, and dragons and krakens and sphinxes came at his command and bowed before him. "Kneel, brother," the crow's eye commanded. "I am your king. I am your god. Worship me, and I will raise you up to be my priest." "Never. No godless man may sit the sea-stone chair." "Why would I want that hard black rock? Brother, look again and see where I am seated." Aeron Damphair looked. The mound of skulls was gone. Now it was metal underneath the crow's eye. A great, tall, twisted seat of razor-sharp iron, barbs and blades and broken swords, all dripping blood. Impaled upon the larger spikes were the bodies of the gods. The maiden was there, and the father, and the mother. The warrior and crone and smith, even the stranger. They hung side by side with all manner of queer foreign gods. The great shepherd and the black goat, three-headed Trios and the pale child Bacalon, the lord of light and the butterfly god of Narth. And there, swollen and green, half devoured by crabs, the drowned god festered with the rest, sea water still dripping from his hair. Then Euron Crowseye laughed again, and the priest woke screaming in the bowels of silence as piss ran down his leg. It was only a dream, a vision born of foul black wine. The king's moot was the last thing Damphair remembered clearly. As the captains lifted Euron onto their shoulders to hail him as his king, the priest had slipped off to find their brother, Victarion. "Euron's blasphemies would bring the drowned god's wrath upon us all," he warned. But Victarion insisted stubbornly that the god had raised their brother up, and that God must cast him down. He will not act, the priest had realized then. It must be me. The king's moot had chosen Euron Crowseye, but the king's moot was made of men, and men were weak and foolish things, too easily swayed by gold and lies. I summoned them here, to Naga's bones in the Grey King's Hall. I called them all together to choose a righteous king, but in their drunken folly they have sinned. It was for him to undo what they had done. The captains and kings raised Euron up, but the common folk shall tear him down, he promised Victarion. I shall go to Great Wick, to Harlaw, to Orkmont, to Pike itself. Every town and village shall my words be heard. No godless man may sit the sea-stone chair. At departing from his brother, he sought solace in the sea. A few of his drowned men made to follow him, but Aeron sent them off with a few sharp words. He wanted no company but God. Down where the longships had been breached along the stony strand, he found a black salt wave, searching and foaming white, where they broke upon a snarled rock, half buried in the sand. The water had been icy cold as he waded in, yet Aeron did not flinch from his god's caress. Waves smashed against his chest, one after another, staggering him, but he pushed on, deeper and deeper, until the waters were breaking over his head. The taste of salt upon his lips was sweeter than any wine. Mingled with the distant roar of songs and celebration coming up from the beach, he'd heard the faint creak of longships settling on the strand. He heard the keening of the wind and now winds. He heard the pounding of the waves, the hammer of his god calling him to battle. And there and then the drowned god had come to him once more, his voice welling up from the depths of the sea. Aeron, my good and faithful servant, you must tell the Ironborn that the Crow's Eye is no true king, that the sea-stone chair by rights belongs to not Victarion. Victarion had offered himself to the captains and kings, but they had spurned him. Not Asher. In his heart, Aeron had always loved Asher best of all his brother Balon's children. The drowned god had blessed her with a warrior spirit and the wisdom of a king, but he had cursed her with a woman's body too. No woman had ever ruled the Iron Islands. She should have never made a claim. She should have spoken for Victarion, added her own strength to his. It was not too late, Aeron had decided as he shivered in the sea. If Victarion took Asher for his wife, they could yet rule together, king and queen. In ancient days, each isle had its salt king and its rock king. Let the old way return. Aeron Damphair had struggled back to shore, full of fierce resolve. He would bring down Euron not with sword or axe, but with the power of his faith. Padding lightly across the stones, his hair plastered black and dank across his brow and cheeks, he stopped for a moment to push it back out of his eyes. And that was where they took him. The mutes who had been watching him, waiting for him, stalking him through strand and spray. A hand clapped down across his mouth, and something hard cracked against the back of his skull. The next time he had opened his eyes, the Damphair found himself fettered in the darkness. Then came the fever, and the taste of blood in his mouth as he twisted in the chains, deep in the bowels of the silence. A weaker man might have wept, but Aeron Damphair prayed, waking, sleeping. Even in his fever dreams he prayed. My God is testing me. I must be strong. I must be true. Once, in the dungeon before this one, a woman brought his food in place of Euron's mute. A young thing, buxom and pretty. She dressed in the finery of a Greenland lady. In the lantern light, she was the loveliest thing Aeron had ever seen. Woman, he said, I am a man of God. I command you, set me free. Oh, I couldn't do that, she said. I have food for you, porridge and honey. She sat beside him on a stool and spooned it into his mouth for him. What is this place? He asked between spoonfuls. My lord father's castle on Oakenshield. The Iron Islands, 1,000 leagues from home. And who are you, child? Thalia Flowers, Lord Hewitt's natural daughter. I am to be King Euron's salt wife. You and I will be kin then. Aeron Damphair raised his eyes to her. His scabbed lips were crusted with wet porridge. Woman. His chains clinked when he moved. Run. He will hurt you. He will kill you. She laughed. Silly, he won't. I'm his love, his lady. He gives me gifts, so many gifts. Silks and furs and jewels. Rags and rocks, he calls them. The Crow's Eye puts no value in such things. That was one of the things that drew men to his service. Most captains kept the lion's share of their plunder, but Euron took almost nothing for himself. He gives me any gown I want. The girl was prattling happily. My sisters used to make me wait on them at table, but Euron made them serve the whole hall naked. Why should he do that, except for love of me? She put a hand on her belly and soothed down the fabric of her gown. I'm going to give him sons. So many sons. He has sons. Baseborn boys and mongrels, Euron says. My sons will come before them. He has sworn by your own drowned god. Aeron would have wept for her. Tears of blood, he thought. You must bear a message to my brother. Not Euron, but Victarion, Lord Captain of the Iron Fleet. Do you know the man I mean? Thalia sat back from him. Yes, she said, but I couldn't bring him any messages. He's gone. Gone? That was the cruelest blow of all. Gone where? East, she said, with all his ships. He's to bring the Dragon Queen to Westeros. I'm to be Euron's salt wife, but he must have a rock wife too, a queen to rule all Westeros at his side. They say she's the most beautiful woman in the world, and she has dragons. The two of us will be as close as sisters. Aeron Damphair hardly heard her. Victarion is gone, half a world away or dead. Surely the drowned god was testing him. This was a lesson for him. Put not your trust in men. Only my faith can save me now. That night, when the tide came rushing back into the prison cell, he prayed that it might rise all night, enough to end his torment. I have been your true and leal servant, he prayed, twisting in his chains. Now snatch me from my brother's hand, and take me down beneath the waves, to be seated at your side. But no deliverance came. Only the mutes, to undo his chains and drag him roughly up a long stone stair to where the silence floated on a cold black sea. And a few days later, as her hull shuddered in the grip of some storm, the Crow's Eye came below again, lantern in hand. This time his other hand held a dagger. Still praying, priest? Your god has forsaken you. You're wrong. It was me who taught you how to pray, little brother. Have you forgotten? I would visit your bedchamber at night when I had too much to drink. You shared a room with Oregon high up in the sea tower. I could hear you praying from outside the door. I always wondered, were you praying that I would choose you, or that I would pass you by? Euron pressed the knife to Aeron's throat. Pray to me. Beg me to end your torment, and I will. Not even you would dare, said the Damphair. I am your brother. No man is more accursed than the Kinslayer, And yet I wear a crown and you rot in chains. How is it that your drowned god allows that when I've killed 3 brothers? Aeron could only gape at him. 3? Well, if you count half-brothers. Do you remember little Robin? Wretched creature. Do you remember that big head of his, how soft it was? All he could do was mule and shit. He was my second. Harlon was my first. All I had to do was pinch his nose shut. The greyscale had turned his mouth to stone so he could not cry out, but his eyes grew frantic as he died. They begged me. When the life went out of them, I went out and pissed into the sea, waiting for God to strike me down. None did. Oh, and Balon was the third, but you knew that. I could not do the deed myself, but it was my hand that pushed him off the bridge. The Crow's Eye pressed the dagger in a little deeper, and Aeron felt blood trickling down his neck. If your drowned god did not smite me for killing 3 brothers, why should he bestir himself for the 4th? Because you are his priest? He stepped back and sheathed his dagger. No, I shall not kill you tonight. A holy man with holy blood, I may have need of that blood later. For now you are condemned to live. A holy man with holy blood, Aeron thought, when his brother had climbed back onto the deck. He mocks me and he mocks the god. Kinslayer, blasphemer, demon in human skin. That night he prayed for his brother's death. It was in the second dungeon that the other holy men began to appear to share his torments. 3 wore the robes of septons of the Greenlands, and 1 was the red raiment of a priest of R'hllor. The last was hardly recognizable as a man. Both his hands had been burned down to the bone, and his face was a charred and blackened horror where 2 blind eyes moved sightlessly above the cracked cheeks dripping pus. He was dead within hours of being shackled to the wall, but the mutes left his body there to ripen for 3 days afterwards. Last were 2 warlocks of the east, with flesh as white as mushrooms, and lips the purplish blue of a bad bruise, all so gaunt and starved that only skin and bones remained. 1 had lost his legs. 3 mutes hung him from a rafter. "Pree!" he cried as he swung back and forth. "Pree! Pree!" Perhaps it was the name of the demon that he worships. "The drowned god protects me," the priest told himself. "He is stronger than the false gods these other worship, stronger than their black sorceries. The drowned god will set me free." In his saner moments, Aeron questioned why the Crow's Eye was collecting priests, but he did not think that he would like the answer. Victarion was gone, and with him hope. Aeron's drowned men likely thought the damp hair was hiding on Old Wick, or Great Wick, or Pike, and wondered when he would emerge to speak against this godless king. Oregon haunted his fever dreams. "You're dead, Uri," Aeron thought. "Sleep now, child, and trouble me no more. Soon I shall come to join you." Whenever Aeron prayed, the legless warlock made queer noises, and his companion babbled wildly in his queer eastern tongue, though whether they were cursing or pleading, the priest could not say. The Septons made soft noises from time to time as well, but not in words that he could understand. Aeron suspected that their tongues had been cut out. When Euron came again, his hair was swept straight back from his brow, and his lips were so blue that they were almost black. He had put aside his driftwood crown. In its place, he wore an iron crown whose points were made from the teeth of sharks. "That which is dead cannot die," said Aeron fiercely. "For he who has tasted death once need never fear again. He was drowned, but he came forth stronger than ever, with steel and fire." "Will you do the same, brother?" Euron asked. "I think not. I think if I drowned you, you'll stay drowned. All gods are lies, but yours are laughable. But yours is laughable. A pale white thing in the likeness of a man. His limbs broken and swollen, and his hair flipping in the water while fish nibble at his face. What fool would worship that?" "He's your god as well," insisted the damp hair. "And when you die, he will judge you harshly, Crow's Eye. You will spend eternity as a sea slug crawling on your belly, eating shit. If you do not fear to kill your own blood, slit my throat and be done with me. I'm weary of your mad boastings." "Kill my own little brother? Blood of my blood, born of the loins of Quellan Greyjoy? And who would share my triumphs? Victory is sweeter with a loved one by your side." "Your victories are hollow. You cannot hold the shields." "Why would I want to hold them?" His brother's smiling eye glittered in the lantern light, blue and bold and full of malice. "The shields have served my purpose. I took them with one hand and gave them away with the other. A great king is open-handed, brother. It is up to the new lords to hold them now. The glory of winning those rocks will be mine forever. When they are lost, the defeat will belong to the 4 fools who so eagerly accepted my gifts." He moved closer. "Our longships are raiding up the Mander and all along the coast, even to the Arbor and the Redwine Straits. The old way, brother." Madness. "Release me," Aeron Damphair commanded in his sternest voice, "or risk the wrath of God." Euron produced a carved stone bottle and a wine cup. "You have a thirsty look about you," he said as he poured. "You need a drink, a taste of evening's shade." "No." Aeron turned his face away. "No, I said." "And I said yes." Euron pulled his head back by the hair and forced the vile liquor into his mouth again. Though Aeron clammed his mouth shut, twisting his head from side to side, he fought as best he could, but in the end he had to choke or swallow. The dreams were even worse the second time. He saw the longships of the Ironborn adrift and burning on a boiling blood-red sea. He saw his brother on the Iron Throne again, but Euron was no longer human. He seemed more squid than man, a monster fathered by a kraken of the deep, his face a mass of writhing tentacles. Beside him stood a shadow in woman's form, long and tall and terrible, her hands alive with pale white fire. Dwarves capered for their amusement, male and female, naked and misshapen, locked in carnal embrace, biting and tearing at each other, as Euron and his mate laughed and laughed and laughed. Aeron dreamed of drowning, too. not of the bliss that would surely follow down in the drowned god's watery halls, but of the terror that even the faithful feel as the water fills their mouth and nose and lungs, and they cannot draw a breath. 3 times the damp hair woke, and 3 times it proved no true waking, but only another chapter in a dream. But at last there came a day when the door of the dungeon swung open, and a mute came splashing through with no food in his hands. Instead he had a ring of keys in his hand, and a lantern in the other. The light was too bright to look upon, and Aeron was afraid of what it meant, bright and terrible. Something has changed, something has happened. "Bring them," said a half-familiar voice from the hapless gloom. "Be quick about it, you know how he gets." "Oh, I do. I've known since I was a boy." One septon made a frightened noise as the mute undid his chains, a half-choked sound that might have been some attempt at speech. The legless warlock stared down at the black water, his lips moving silently in prayer. When the mute came for Aeron, he tried to struggle, but the strength had gone from his limbs, and one blow was all it took to quiet him. His wrist was unshackled, then the other. "Free," he told himself. "I'm free." But when he tried to take a step, his weakened legs folded under him. Not one of the prisoners was fit enough to walk. In the end, the mutes had to summon more of their kind. 2 of them grasped Aeron by the arms and dragged him up a spiral stair. His feet banged off the steps as they ascended, sending stabbing pains up his leg. He bit his lips to keep from crying out. The priest could hear the warlocks just behind him. The septums brought up the rear, sobbing and gasping. With every turn of the stair, the steps grew brighter, until finally a window appeared in the left-hand wall. It was only a slit in the stone, a bare-handed breadth across, but that was wide enough to admit a shaft of sunlight. So golden, the Damphair thought, so beautiful. When they pulled him up the steps through the light, he felt its warmth upon his face, and tears rolled down one cheek. The sea. I can smell the sea. The drowned god has not abandoned me. The sea will make me whole again. That which is dead can never die, but rises again harder and stronger. "Take me to the water," he commanded, as if he were still back in the Iron Islands, surrounded by his drowned men, but the mutes were his brother's creatures, and they paid him no heed. They dragged him up more steps, down a torchlit gallery, and into a bleak stone hall where a dozen bodies were hanging from the rafters, turning and swaying. A dozen of Euron's captains were gathered in the hall, drinking wine beneath the corpses. Left-hand Lucas Codd sat in the place of honour, wearing a heavy silken tapestry as a cloak. Beside him was the Red Oarsman, and further down, pinch-faced John Meyer, Stonehand, and Rogan Saltbeard. "Who are these dead?" Aeron commanded. His tongue was so thick the words came out in a rusty whisper, faint as a mouse breaking wind. "The lord that held this castle, with his kin." The voice belonged to Torwald a Browntooth, one of his brother's captains, a creature near as vile as the Crow's Eye himself. "Pigs," said another vile creature, the one they called the Red Oarsman. "This was their isle, a rock just off the arbour. They dared oink threats at us. Redwide, oink. Hightower, oink. Tyrell, oink, oink, oink. So we sent them squealing down to hell." The arbour. Not since the drowned god had blessed him with a second life had Aeron Damphair ventured so far from the Iron Islands. "This is not my place. I do not belong here. I should be with my drowned men, preaching against the Crow's Eye." "Have your gods been good to you in the dark?" asked Left-Hand Lucas Codd. One of the warlocks snarled some answer in his ugly eastern tongue. "I curse you all." "Your curses have now power here, priest," said Left-Hand Lucas Codd. "The Crow's Eye has fed your drowned god well, but he has grown fat with sacrifice. Words are wind, but blood is power. We have given thousands to the sea, and he has given us victories." "Count yourself blessed, Damphair," said Stonehand. "We are going back to sea. The red wine fleet creeps towards us. The winds have been against them rounding dawn, but they're finally near enough to have emboldened the old women in Old Town. So now Leighton Hightower's sons move down the Whispering Sound in hopes of catching us in the rear." "You know what it's like to be caught in the rear, don't you?" said the Red Oarsman, laughing. "Take them to the ships," Torwald Browntooth commanded. And so Aeron Damphair returned to the Salt Sea. A dozen longships were drawn up at the wharf below the castle, and twice as many beached along the strand. Familiar banners streamed from their masts, the Greyjoy Kraken, the Bloody Moon of Winch, the war horn of the Good Brothers, but from their sterns flew a flag the priest had never seen before, a red eye with a black pupil beneath an iron crown supported by 2 crows. Beyond them, a host of merchant ships floated on a tranquil turquoise sea. Cogs, carracks, fishing boats, even a great cog, a swollen sow of a ship as big as the Leviathan. Prizes of war, the Damphair knew. Euron Crowseye stood upon the deck of Silence, clad in a suit of black scale armour like nothing Aeron had ever seen before. Dark as smoke it was, but Euron wore it as easily as if it were the thinnest silk. The scales were edged in red gold, and gleamed and shimmered when they moved. Patterns could be seen within the metal, walls and glyphs and arcane symbols folded into the steel. Valyrian steel, the Damphair knew. His armour is Valyrian steel. In all the 7 kingdoms, no man owned a suit of Valyrian steel. Such things had been known 400 years ago, in the days before the Doom, but even then they would have cost a kingdom. Euron did not lie. He had been to Valyria. No wonder he was mad. "Your Grace," said Torwood Browntooth, "I have the priests. What you have done with them?" "Bind them to the prows," Euron commanded. "My brother on the Silence. Take one for yourself. Let them dice for the others, one to a ship. Let them feel the spray, the kiss of the drowned god, wet and salty." This time the mutes did not drag him below. Instead they lashed him to the prow of the Silence, beside her figurehead, a naked maiden slim and strong with outstretched arms and wind-blown hair, but no mouth below her nose. They bound Aeron Damphair tight with strips of leather that would shrink when wet, clad only in his beard and breechclout. The Crow's Eye spoke a command. A black sail was raised, lines were cast off, and the Silence backed away from shore to the slow beat of the oarsman drum, and the Silence backed away from shore to the slow beat of the oarmaster's drum, her oars rising and dipping and rising again, churning the water. Above them the castle was burning, flames licking from the open windows. When they were well out to sea, Euron returned to him. "Brother," he said, "you look forlorn. I have a gift for you." He beckoned, and two of his bastard sons dragged the woman forward and bound her to the prow of the other side of the figurehead. Naked as a mouthless maiden, her smooth belly was just beginning to swell with the child she was carrying, her cheeks red with tears. She did not struggle as the boys tightened her bonds. Her hair hung down in front of her face, but Aeron knew her all the same. "Valia flowers," he called. "Have courage, girl. All this will be over soon, and we will feast together in the drowned god's watery halls." The girl raised up her head, but made no answer. She has no tongue to answer with, the Damphair knew. He licked his lips and tasted salt. There we go. The Forsaken. The most metal chapter so far in A Song of Ice and Fire. There we go, little Halloween spookiness for you. How was that? We can move on to some Q&A stuff, but before I do Q&A, I want to read through the chat and see what people had to say. I wasn't reading the chat as I was reading out the thing, because I know I would have got distracted. The whole thing was almost derailed when, instead of saying writhing mass of tentacles, I nearly said writhing mass of testicles, so I only just salvaged it. But yeah, for the Q&A section, if you have any questions, feel free to send in a super chat or some Streamlab donations, up to you. Okay. Bum, bum, bum. Shark teeth crown badass, it certainly is. When George writes chapters like this, he's calling up Stephen King and asking him for whatever cocktail or alcohol drugs he was back on in the 80s. Yeah, I haven't read enough Stephen King, although I do want to. But yeah, I'm a huge sucker for when George does dreams and visions and weird prophetic stuff. I just love how creative and out there you can be. And I've been reading Dragonbone Chair. I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and man, it's so interesting seeing how inspired George clearly was by that book. Inspired to the point where I sit back sometimes and I'm like, oh, okay, you kind of copied this. But of course, ideas are cheap. It's the execution that matters, right? Everything's been done before. But yeah, in Dragonbone share there a fair share of, not loads, but creepy, horrific dreams, and clearly George took inspiration from that. And as people often say, it's a shame that the Game of Thrones show just didn't lean into weird dreams and visions, and like even the House of the Undying is like one of the most boring adaptations from book to screen. She just like walked into a couple of rooms. It's just it was whatever. House of the Dragon seems to be pushing more into the weird vision stuff with Daemon. To mixed response, of course. I've still got mixed feelings on the whole Daemon weird with vision, but there we go. Carl Karsnark is here. How you doing, Carl? Mike Bump jump scare. Yes. Apologies for the bit where I was getting a bit excited while reading, and I full on just like slapped my fucking mic, and it went like it went skidding across my desk. I was like, fuck. It's Halloween. Of course I need jump scares. Come on. Disputed Lands is in the chat. Hello, Disputed Lands. How you doing? Feel free to check out Disputed Lands and the videos on that channel. Good stuff. Love how much of the books talk about Quellen's loins. From the loins of Quellon Greyjoy himself. I messed up a couple of lines while reading that because it's been the transcript is kind of odd. It's not put down as it should be in a book. Like the paragraph breaks aren't correct, and at one point I was a bit confused and I thought that they had accidentally left out speech marks, but they hadn't. So and I think a couple of words shouldn't have been in there. There are a few sentences I read out loud and I was like, that doesn't make any sense, but I kept going. So it was not a perfect transcription, but of course everything with Thalia Flowers is very 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 creepy. Just the body horror of like this young woman, naked, slightly pregnant, tied to the prow of a ship without a tongue, basically, to be ridden to her death. That's fucking terrifying. Sailed to her death. I don't know if this is the last Aeron chapter and it's basically implied they are inevitably going to die when the ship sets sail, or if we're going to see Aeron's perspective for the upcoming Battle of Blood. That's the main theory, that we're going to see what goes down. If that theory is correct, if Euron does attack Old Town, there's some kind of blood sacrifice, whatever, we're going to have a proper POV of that battle. Like, literally, he's tied to the front of the silence like a goddamn GoPro. So that would probably be the second and last Aeron chapter in Winds, I imagine. Joseph said, Cersei, question mark? Yes, so there's a very interesting part of this chapter, which is, and you see it on screen, right, during this wonderful art piece. There's a figure, a woman made of white light, flaming, not white but pale, flaming pale light next to Euron, and people have had lots of theories about that. The general thinking behind it is that it's foreshadowing Euron's wife, that potentially at some point Euron will sit the Iron Throne, or maybe he'll sit in the Hideout in Old Town, but he'll have some kind of base of operations. Could be King's Landing, it could be transforming Old Town into an Eldritch version of Isengard, I don't know. But he will sit on some kind of throne, proclaim himself king, and, well, he already has, but he'll have a wife with him. And who is that wife? Who could it be? It could be Daenerys, right? Because, of course, he's sent Victarion off to woo Daenerys, to bring her back, and, he wants his rock wife to be Dany. He doesn't want her, he wants her dragons, right? Presumably. And he sent Victarion off with dragon binder, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, you have Daenerys, she has dragons. Is that why it's pale flame because of Dany? Probably not. I think Daenerys' story can go in a bunch of directions, but is she going to marry Euron? Probably not. I mean, it'll be a fun twist if she just goes full on villain and marries Euron, but I don't quite see it. So that leaves three more options. One of them is Cersei, right? So Joseph in the chat suggested Cersei. And And it could be, I mean, the most... So there are two reasons for this. One, Cersei is associated with flame, wildfire. There's kind of minor Mad King parallels there, where she watches the Tower of the Hand burn in green flame, and she sort of seems a bit obsessed with it, and she's going a bit crazy, so perhaps there's a Mad Queen arc going on. Is she going to blow up the Scepter of Baelor like in the show? Is she going to Guy Fawkes that shit? We don't know. So is the pale flame, like pale green flame? Is Cersei going to marry Euron? What else backs this up? Well, the show. And the show, by no means, was a one-to-one of what's going to happen in the books, but it could be that one of the myriad of notes George gave to Benioff and Weiss was Cersei marries Euron, which is why they felt the need to introduce Euron. And, of course, in the show, Cersei and Euron, they never officially marry, but they are betrothed. Do they marry? I can't even remember. But they are betrothed, and it's very cringy because Euron is cringe, and later stage Cersei is empty, just an empty cardboard cutout of a blonde female Vulcan. So there we go. But yeah, maybe it'll be less of a I'll give you my ships if you marry me because I have a big cock and I'm Euron. Finger in the bum. The finger in the bum line goes hard, I'm not gonna lie. Everything else is cringe, but finger in the bum, it was so out there, it was so stupid. In a roundabout way, it kind of became cool again. It was so not funny that it kind of became funny. Anyway. Yeah, so it's quite simplistic in the show. In the books, I imagine it's not going to be that simple. If Cersei and Euron do get together, it is going to be evil Eldritch King with the Mad Queen, the fiery Mad Queen. And I don't know, will Euron come to King's Landing and rule with Cersei, at least until perhaps young Griff overthrows them? And, you know, that feeds into the idea of young Griff being this heroic figure. I'm getting pins and needles in my hands. Why is this happening? This hurts. This heroic figure who will be seen as the true king and the man who completes the traditional cycle of this sort of War of the Roses, right? He's the Owen Tudor. He's not the Owen Tudor, sorry. He's the Henry Tudor, Henry VII, coming in during this chaotic civil war to save the day and sit on the throne. He's the natural next step of the cycle, a cycle that potentially will be broken by Daenerys, right? But whether he's a Targaryen or Blackfire, young Griff, boom, he's going to come in. He could defeat the evil King Euron. He'll be seen as a hero, and then that could lead to all kind of frictions between, you know, Jon and Dany in the north fighting the White Walkers, coming south in the aftermath. You know, scouring of the Shire situation. There's still like a brutal aftermath, and that is Aegon's on the throne. Dany's like, this guy is now treated as a hero, and I'm ignored. Fuck this guy. Maybe he's a Blackfire as well. Blah blah blah. But I don't know. Young Griff versus Euron and Cersei, I feel like I don't know how you could sustain that for long enough. You know, I feel like young Griff is en route to take King's Landing, and it would be weird to have an entire subplot of Euron going to King's Landing and ruling next to Cersei. Like, he wouldn't really do enough before young Griff takes over, I think. So I think what's more likely is young Griff does take King's Landing. It's just that honestly, I think that's probably when Cersei dies. It'll be a nice way to wrap up her story there. But if she does survive, perhaps that's when she flees and teams up with Euron. And then we have a sort of, Queen Cersei, King Euron, ruling from Castle Rock, ruling from Old Town. I'm not sure. But I don't know. See, part of me thinks that, like, book Cersei and book Euron teaming up in concept, a really fucking fun idea. That's a hot couple right there. But I don't quite logistically see it adding up. Like, it feels a bit too out there for me. But because it did happen in the show, on the other hand, it's like, maybe, yeah, could happen. What else? Don't worry about super chats, everyone. I'll get to that once I've gone through the chat and spoken a bit more about the Forsaken. So, again, send in a super chat if you have a question for me. I want to read off a bunch of questions. We'll see how it goes. Oh, yes, I haven't finished. So what did I say? I said Dany could be the wife. Probably unlikely. Cersei could be the wife. I would say unlikely if it didn't happen in the show, but the show does increase the odds somewhat. Two other options, Melisandre. So you're probably thinking, okay, so she's associated with fire, but what's that got to do with Euron? Maybe it's reverse Melisandre. It's Bizarro Melisandre. It's the anti-Mel. She turns evil. Maybe something goes wrong in the north. Maybe Stannis dies. Maybe all her hope dissipates and she goes, fuck it, I'm no longer worshipping the Lord of Light, he's betrayed me. I'm worshipping the Great Other. And Perhaps she sees Euron as an avatar of the Great Other. Maybe she sees the drowned god, or whatever. Not the drowned god, but maybe she sees Euron, as like as the Jesus to the Great Other, right? Or the Antichrist or something. So she will team up with Euron and be like, I'm bad now, and I'm going to be the evil witch sorceress at Euron's side. And that may sound like a stretch, and it may sound like the only thing linking that is the fact that she deals in flames, but this is where we go back to something interesting. I think I addressed this in my what was it? I think it was my extended Hightower video. I have the classic Hightower video that got fucking demonetized by HBO, so that's cost me a lot of money. Thank you, HBO, for being... But I did an extended version on Patreon where I 5 extra minutes or so just talking about the Battle of Blood and what that could entail. And as part of it, I talk about who Euron's future wife will be. I definitely want to cover this more in a future video. And Quinn the GM has a video about this, by the way. But there's something quite interesting, which is back in the day, George R.R. Martin commissioned a company to make a bunch of miniatures of his A Song of Ice and Fire characters, because he's a big fat nerd, and that's absolutely what I would do if I had an epic fantasy saga. I'd commission miniatures to be made. Maybe I'd paint them myself, No, I wouldn't trust myself to paint them. It took me long enough to paint a single Warhammer 40k Gretchen. Anyway, but so he commissioned them to make a Melisandre figure, right? But he commissioned them to make 2. One was the classic one, red dress, red hair, red eyes, sexy. But then he commissioned them to do another one where she's wearing like a blue dress, and she has like white hair or blue hair, and the flames in her hands are blue. It's almost like a sort of an other version of Melisandre, like could it be a white resurrected Melisandre? Could it be Melisandre turning to the Great Other instead of the Lord of Light and being like reverse fire magic or like white flame magic? I don't know. It could just be cool. It could be that George was just like, oh, could you also do a version where it's kind of like a blue, do blue version of Melisandre? That's cool, because why not? He's rich, he can afford to ask for that. But it could also be a little spoiler for the future. Again, maybe she becomes this sort of villainous figure, and she teams up with Euron. Melisandre and Euron, again, these are some sexy couples. What next? Oh, and then finally, and this is the really out there option, Euron's wife in the vision could be Melora the Mad Maid. This is really out there. So, essentially, you have the Hightower. Lord Leighton Hightower has been in that tower for 10 decades, and he hasn't come out, not even to attend Robert's funeral or Joffrey's wedding for Marjorie or whatever, to Marjorie. He's just stuck in that tower, and he's there with Melora the Mad Maid, who's his eldest daughter, and as you can imagine, she's a maid, and she's kind of crazy, apparently, and she delves into ancient tomes and scrolls and spells, and apparently they are, both of them, the Lord and his daughter, they're rifling through magic stuff to help ward off against Euron. Now, if you're a real fan, you know that what's really happening is that they're putting together a giant mecha that will wield the High Tower as a giant white lance to fight against the Euron Kraken Kaiju. But of course, not everyone's privy to that information, but if you know, you know. And there are theories that Leighton Hightower is actually dead, and that Melora the Mad Maid is ruling through him and is doing a Weekend at Bernie situation. A bit of a Biden situation going on. She's got her hand up the butt, and she's just like pretending that like this guy's really in power, but like she's the one behind the scenes, which is quite a fun concept. I'm not sure how that works in practice. Maybe Leighton only sends out letters, or anyway. Long story short, Melora, she's a crazy witch woman apparently, and it's possible that when Euron attacks Old Town, she will actually join him, and she will be his the wife with the pale flame, and maybe the pale flame represents the High Tower. I don't know, a more out there option. But anyway, that was a massive fucking tangent. Long story short, Euron's partner, wife, mate, this woman, pale fire, we don't know. Could be Daenerys, could be Cersei, could be Melisandre, could be Melora. If there are any more suggestions, let me know in the chat, because I think those are the main four. Listening to Haven narrate gets me motivated to finally get off my ass and write my fantasy novel, just to have Haven read it aloud audiobook style. Go, go, go. Write that novel. Write that novel. You have no excuse. Right? Don't be the kind of guy who says, "Oh, but what do you do? I write, but you don't actually write. Ideas are not writing. Sit down and write. Get this shit done. A little bit a day, and that little bit can be a sentence. It can be a sentence a day. It can be a page a day. It can be 10 pages a day. It can be a novel a day, for all I know. But sit down and write. Start the process now. Start the process now. Genuinely, I'm not even joking. Write one word, or write notes down, or draw a map. If you want to do an epic fantasy saga, do it. Right? If you can't necessarily motivate yourself, then use this as external motivation. I've got 50k subs. I'm a big channel. If you write a fantasy novel, I'm happy to do videos about it. Right? I've said this to some of my friends. I've said this to up and coming people who want to write novels. I've said I want to start making videos about all kind of fantasy, and if there's some I like from smaller authors and so on, I will help promote it by making animated little videos about them and maybe doing some audio readings and so on. So yeah, it's hard to get writing. It's hard to get started. I myself have a saga in my head and I haven't started because I want to make sure the YouTube situation gets stable financially before I start writing books. But yeah, when best to officially say I have started writing my book? Then Halloween of 2024. Winks in the chat, everyone. I was desperately trying to come up with. Honestly, I haven't read The Forsaken in ages, and I forgot how. I kind of forgot half of what happens in it, and I forgot there were a bunch of characters in it, like Brown Tooth and Left Hand Lucas Cod, and fucking Dumbbeard and Fuckface and all these different Vikings. So I was desperately like, oh shit, I need to come up with new voices. So apparently my Left Hand Lucas Cod is nasally, and my, what was it called? Something Beard? It wasn't Brown Beard, what was it? Something Beard. It's a bit deeper like this. Bum, bum, bum. So yeah, people saying Happy Halloween, everyone. Happy Halloween. Did I say that at the start of the stream? Happy Halloween. I'm not doing anything specific for Halloween. So I'm just working on my Frey video, so that's fun. But I thought I'd do this little stream, and after this, I'm going to be doing one of my patrons has made a Halloween themed A Song of Ice and Fire Jeopardy. So we'll be doing some Jeopardy in the Patreon Discord. So if you're a patron watching this and you haven't seen that notification, check it out. That's in a few hours. Excuse me. But then tomorrow I am actually going to a party. I'm going to a Halloween / birthday party. So there we go. One day too late, so hopefully it's okay. I'm putting together a pirate costume. Short notice, so it's a bit generic. Anyway, Quinn appeared for a bit. Hello, Quinn. How you doing? Oh, I have an externship interview in 20 minutes, but let's go. What's an externship? I know what an internship. What the fuck is an externship? I think Quinn made that up. It's actually pronounced damp hair. Oh yeah. I don't want to be smug. I don't want to brag. As the plane goes overhead. There we go. I never know if you can hear that. I'm not going crazy. There genuinely is a plane. Yeah, I don't want to brag, but I always pronounced A Song of Ice and Fire names correct in my head. The whole, some people pronounce damp hair as damn fair, or some people pronounce kettle black as kettle back. I still hear this to this day, like proper established A Song of Ice and Fire YouTubers talking about their kettlebacks, and I'm like, kettleback? What are you talking about? Yeah, I've never, every time I've never had a mispronunciation moment. Yeah. Bum 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 bum. Bloodraven gave him a dream. Is this Bloodraven's fault? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly triggered by the nightshade. Sorry, the shade of the evening. Oh, is that the same? The shade of the evening, which gives terrifying visions. But it could be the Bloodraven's going in there and manipulating things and giving specific. I don't know. Well, no, the chat just skipped all the way down. Hold on, let's see what people were saying. Bloodraven's fault, maybe. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'm getting to the bit where everyone's like, good reading. Thank you very much. I think my mouth is a bit dry for this one, but we need Gurm to ruin this chapter by making Euron do a 180 near the end and pull a I'm actually just misunderstood. Everyone is a villain in someone else's story. I'm doing this to save the world. That would be so fun. That would be funny. It is fun. It is fun to have villains that are just outright villains in A Song of Ice and Fire, because outright villains exist in real life. Outright monsters. We don't need the Mountain or Ramsay or Euron to be, some people are just black at heart. Although the more interesting characters are the grey characters, the more morally complex characters. But like, you've got to have a dash of pure evil, because that's just fun. TV in front of my room got left on ABC, so my dog's been suffering through 40 minutes of The View. I know what The View is. That's an American thing. We have a British version of The View that's called Loose Women. I don't watch it, but I imagine it's just as insufferable. Right. Yeah, Quinn's saying, I think we get at least one more damp air chapter. I think so too. It'll be weird if that's the last one. The battle's in the Red Wine Straits, not Old Town. Yes, but there's a theory that actually Euron is trolling and he's not going to the Red Wine Straits. He's going to go to Old Town. Or I don't know. Woman in Pale Fire is definitely meant to represent Daenerys, who Aeron thinks Euron is going to marry. That's a good point. That, clearly there's more to Shade of the Evening isn't just hallucinogenic, like it's also magical. It's not just here are some weird visions, it's like there's some prophetic stuff stirred into it. But that being said, that doesn't mean it's correct. So yeah, there being a woman of pale fire next to Euron, it could be Daenerys, but that could just be, this is one potential path of the future, is that they get together, but they probably won't. Euron and Cersei deserve each other. That would be a wild fucking team up. Hot take, young Griff will ally himself with the Starks. Bran will reveal the key to defeating Dany's dragons. Westeros drowns in Chad Aegon virgin Dany memes. Probably not, I'm afraid. This art is insane. I love it. Yes, I'll put the link in the description to the Reddit post I found it from after this stream. I should have got a picture of that Melisandre miniature. Bum 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 bum. God, I'm just making my way through the chat still. Show Euron is cringe. He kind of became weirdly, in the sense that by the later seasons I gave up. He kind of became like endearingly cringe, like charmingly cringe. Well, I was just like, I don't give a shit anymore, so I might as well just enjoy what I can find. And I was like, Euron, he's kind of banter. A finger in the bum. What a line. It's just struck me now that the finger in the bum reference might be a bizarre nod to Euron in the books, which is kind of weird in terms of his potential abuse of Aeron. Okay, there we go. Okay, I just went through the chat to see what people were chatting about. I didn't want to distract myself during the reading by checking the chat, but there we go. More mustache-twirling villains, the better. Villains are supposed to be unapologetically evil. That's why we love them. Not morally conflicted sad boys. I mean, it depends. Depends on the genre, depends on the tone, depends on the story. You could easily have mustache-twirling villains that are more boring than morally conflicted villains, and then at the same time you can have morally conflicted villains that are more boring than... It's about how well they're written and whether it fits in the narrative and so on. One is not inherently better than the other, I think. It's about how it's handled. Okay, well, we've made it down the chat, so... Hope everyone's having a fun Halloween, by the way. I'm getting hungry. I need to have some dinner soon. But let's read out some super chats. We're on to the Q&A section of this live stream. And again, if you want to send in a super chat to ask some questions, go ahead. Thank you for the super chat from Bilbo Baggins, who asks, any possibilities for more alternate fantasy videos like you did with the Blackfire Rebellions, such as what if the Greens won the dance, for example? Yes. Yeah. In fact, I've got lots of people... I've got lots of people saying they love the what if all the Blackfire Rebellion succeeded. So again, yeah, that's on the list. I have a bunch of ideas. I've got the book versus show, house histories, what ifs. Again, expanding to more genres, not to more genres, but to more fantasy series and so on. Yeah, again, I do need to take into account what performs the best, and book versus show does perform the best compared to solely animated stuff, but book versus show is also more at risk of being targeted by bullshit copyright strike, so it's sort of, it's a balancing act. But yeah, I'd love to do some what ifs. In fact, in the chat, throw in some fun what if ideas. The whole what if the Greens won the dance is sort of, it's a fun concept, but it is kind of just like a spoilery title. Just a spoilery potentially for Hot D watchers. Because obviously, without spoiling things here, the end of Hot D is messy, right? It's not necessarily X side wins, but it's still, that could be a bit of a spoilery title. But yeah, what other what if ideas are there? Are you a villain if you're morally conflicted? Well, it depends what you mean by villain. If you mean antagonist, an antagonist could be anything. They could be good. You could have a morally good antagonist and a morally bad protagonist, but it depends on the story. What if John Connington won the Battle of the Bells? That would be an interesting one. That one would probably have to follow an actual Robert's Rebellion video. I think it would make sense to that would be a good two-parter actually, to do a breaking down Robert's Rebellion as a war, and then following that up with what if John Con won the Battle of the Bells, or it could be broader, like what if Robert lost the Robert's Rebellion and then kind of work that out and so on and so forth. What if Rhaegar overthrew his father? That's a really fun idea. Videos like this, I'd have to go into several branching paths, because I don't just want to be, this is what would happen. It'll be like, okay, here's one fun idea, here's another fun idea, here's another one. The what ifs are harder than you would think, actually, because you want... The reason why the Blackfire ones are so fun is because you could have a certain side win, and then future events, you could tie those future events in. But with other what ifs, it just kind of becomes pure fan fiction, where you're like, well, what happens next? Well, the future events won't happen in this timeline, so how do you come up with a fun scenario? It's just kind of, so and so wins and now they rule, and then it's like, okay, what happens then? But Robert's Rebellion one would be fun, because you could assume that the White Walker thing is happening anyway. Potentially. Or maybe the Birth of the Dragons are pushing the White Walkers a bit more, and that wouldn't really happen without Daenerys being in exile. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, fun idea. What if Aerys the Mad was killed at Duskendale, accidentally or intentionally before Sir Barristan? And then Rhaegar takes over, and Tywin says, what a horrible shame. Anyway, and then becomes Rhaegar's hand. That would be interesting. See, that would be interesting, but again, it's like, all the major events after the Battle of Duskendale canonically are linked to Aerys being king and the aftermath of the rebellion. So it's like, the only event that seems to be set in stone and even this is up in the air, but potentially set in stone, is the Other's invasion. So how do you do a what if video that isn't just Rhaegar takes over and then proceeds to be King Rhaegar, and then... Oh, no, because we can assume that Rhaegar is still going to try Lyanna shenanigans. The difference is that it will be King Rhaegar marrying Lyanna, and that could take various different paths, and that could affect the war, it could affect who supports Aerys. Oh, yes, of course, because, you know, if people ride to the Red Keep, you know, Lord Stark and so on, Rhaegar's not going to burn them at the stake, is he? So that could change the dynamic of the rebellion. There probably still would be a rebellion, right? Robert would be like, you stole my betrothed, but if he's a king, does he need to steal a betrothed? We still don't know enough about the backstory, though, of the... Anyway, like a Connington what if, because that way you can shit on the house. Quinn would have that taken down in a second. He'd contact the CEO of YouTube, whoever that is, and be like, take this down, this is Connington slander. What if Jacelyn Bywater survived from Merlin? Merlin, you are such a... You prick. This guy, this is a COD stan. This is the only COD stan in the world who keeps asking me House COD related questions. Now he's like, what if Jacqueline Bywater survived? The random dude that Tyrion makes captain of the Gold Cloaks in A Clash of Kings, who then gets shot with an arrow during Stannis' attempted attack. What am I supposed to do? What if Jacqueline Bywater survived? He'd probably just get fucking fired and replaced with someone else. What if the first men resisted the Andals? That's cool. That is cool. But again, that's so broad. It's like, I'm not sure what I can really do with that. What if the North had been conquered by the Andals? Okay. Yeah, maybe. There's some fun stuff there. Thanks for tagging me, by the way, to do your what if. That does help me find them. What if the Rhoynar under Nymeria had gone and conquered the whole of Westeros like the Andals had done to the First Men? So in not just Dawn, they just conquered through. Interesting. What if I read the Forsaken chapter? I already have, buddy. I already have. If you missed it, feel free to watch from the start. Okay, anyway, let's move on to the next. Thanks for the what if ideas. You understand that they are quite difficult, because there are lots of what ifs. You know, some people are like what if Aegon's conquest failed, and it's like, but I don't really know what if. You know, the kings stay in power and then they proceed to, like, at that point it's just fan fiction. They fight each other. They do this and that. Like, I don't know. You know, like, I don't know. Because nothing is set in stone, apart from potentially White Walkers coming back 300 years later. So, like, I don't know. But yeah, keep sending in what if ideas in the chat while I go through. So, I'm a big fan of alternate history, and there needs to be more alternate fantasy. Thank you for the super chat from the Creed Evolution. Your whole name isn't displaying for me. That's really annoying. Why is your whole name the Creed? Is it the Creed Evolution? God damn it! Show me the. Yes, the Creed Evolution. It wasn't shown. Thank you so much. Who says, what place of Planetos, anytime, would you like to read a story from? From the POV of someone living at the time. Cheers from Uruguay. Oh, hello Uruguay. How you doing? Okay, people from all over the place. What place of Planetos, anytime, would you like to read a story from? From the POV of someone living at the time. So a POV, like a POV short story, perhaps, from anyone at any time, anywhere in Planetos. I mean, I have a hard time making decisions when people say, do you like A or B? I don't know how I'm going to pick through the entirety of Planet Stars. I mean, okay, so boring answer in terms of Westerosi Targaryen history. What period would I like to see a story in? Well, simply because we've had Fire and Blood and we haven't had Fire and Blood Part 2, Blood and Fire, a Blackfire Rebellion based story, right? As in not relating to Dunk and Egg. That could be fun. Like, or something, a story set in the court of Aegon IV, I think would be really fun. Or the first Blackfire Rebellion, or War of the Ninepenny Kings. That could be fun. That's the boring answer. More interesting answer, I mean, yeah, let's move beyond Westeros, actually. Where haven't we been? We've been to Bravos. We've seen a bit of Pentos. What's like a weird... There's just some places with cool names we barely know anything about, like Muscovy. What's going on in Muscovy? You know, what about Qohor, where they know how to... They potentially sacrifice children to make Valyrian steel weapons, to reforge Valyrian steel weapons. Like, huh? What's going on in Qohor? Yeeti. I'm going to say Yeeti. A story from Yeeti would be fun. Just because it's a fun change of pace. Now, that being said, like, I'd want it from George, right? So, like, I'm not interested in the idea of an animated Yeeti series, because I'm like, okay, if you want to do a fantasy series set in a kingdom inspired by Asia in the past, so whether that's, I don't know, Imperial China or Korea or feudal Japan or Southeast Asia or whatever, then, you know, there's plenty of fantasy out there that is inspired by East Asia. You know, why take this, like, this very, you know, surface level world building of Yeeti, which is partly based on Imperial China, and be like, let's do a series out of this because it's connected to Game of Thrones. Like, no, I don't want that, because George hasn't written extensively about it enough. Like, I just don't want that, you know. Almost doesn't feel fair in a way. It's like there are other authors who are writing fantasy inspired by East Asia. Adapt some of their stuff. Don't adapt shallow world building that George threw into his book because he was like, oh, let's get as many things down as possible, and here are some creative ideas and so on. Because George hasn't written any stories in E.T. If he does, then maybe I'll want to see an adaptation there. But yeah. Anyway, thank you for the super chat from Coleshot, who says, can you read the little story I have sent to you? Coleshot's a patron of mine. You want me to read your story? Okay. You sent me a little bit of writing you did. I'll read that out loud, of course I will. So this is Coleshot's story, and it is of course Westeros related. In the mist, hold on, let's try that again. Fumbled the first hurdle. Okay. In the mist-laden valleys of Raventree Hall, where the shadows seemed to move with lives of their own, Lord Titus Blackwood had become obsessed. The dead weirwood tree, stark and twisted, loomed over the hall as if guarding secrets from centuries past. It stood leafless and lifeless, its carved face cracked and hollow, eyes staring into oblivion. But Titos felt an energy buried deep within it, as though something ancient pulsed just below its gnarled bark, waiting to be unleashed. The night had grown colder and darker in the Riverlands, and rumours spread through the villages of strange disappearances. Peasants who left to gather firewood or hunt in the nearby forest simply vanished, and fear gripped the hearts of those left behind. The villagers spoke of shadows, of whispers in the trees that beckoned the unwary. Some swore they saw figures moving towards Raventree Hall under cover of darkness, drawn to the cursed place as though by some spell. But Titos knew he had no need for spells. What he required, he gathered with his own hands. His black cloak billowed in the wind as he moved through the night, silent as death itself, until he found the ones he sought. He brought them, bound and blindfolded, back to Raventree Hall, down to the roots of the weirwood where he had prepared a ritual chamber. Candles cast a sickly light, and the walls seemed to echo with the whispers of those long dead. One by one the sacrifices were laid before the weirwood, their terrified pleas filling the empty halls. But Titos' face was resolute, his eyes dark with purpose. He held his obsidian dagger close, the blade gleaming with a coldness that matched the bitter night air. As the blood of the first peasant stained the root of the tree, Tytos murmured ancient words, chants he had learned from the forbidden texts hidden in the darkest corners of his family's libraries. The roots of the weirwood seemed to stir, its bark groaning as though awakening from some unnatural slumber. With each sacrifice, the tree absorbed the life given to it, drinking deeply of the blood that soaked into the soil beneath it. Night after night, the rituals continued and the rumours grew more frantic. The villagers were too terrified to venture near Raventree Hall, fearful of becoming the next to vanish. And still the dead weirwood began to change. Cracks in its bark healed over, and faint traces of red, the colour of life itself, began to seep into its hollowed eyes like the ghosts of leaves that had not been there in 100 years. But no matter how much blood he spilled, the weirwood did not fully awaken. Frustrated and consumed by his own dark longing, Tytos began to suspect that he had not given it enough. He would need something greater, something more significant, a soul that bore the weight of an ancient lineage, bound to the earth and the roots of the old gods. He would need a child of the Blackwood line. As he stood before the weirwood one last time, Tytos felt the eyes of the trees dead upon him, the eyes of the dead tree upon him, watching with an ancient hunger that had spanned generations. For a moment he saw the face in the bark shift, its cracked lips curling into a cruel smile. Very nice. Well done. Applause for Kolshot in the chat, everyone. So this was some fun. There was some fun Song of Ice and Fire fan fiction from Kolshot. Thank you for the super chat. A darker look at Tytos Blackwood, who, of course, in the books isn't that kind of character, but here's a weird, dark Halloween version where he sacrifices people to the weirwood for the old gods. Will they strike this for copyright? They better not. That is quite funny. Very well written, Kolshot. Very well written. Your grasp was I know you're German. Your grasp of English is very good in that. That was really good. Right, good stuff. So, I'm going to check Streamlabs donations. So I've given up a bit on Streamlabs just because it keeps crashing my streams even when I'm doing nothing. Plane going overhead. Excuse me. Hopefully if I improve my PC a bit more, I can actually have Streamlabs like streaming without crashing. I don't know. Anyway. We'll see if... I remember when I tried to open up Streamlabs when I was streaming with Quinn and he turned into a robot. Just... So we'll see how it goes. Bum 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 bum. Okay. Cool. Oh, there was actually a Streamlabs donation 16 days ago. So this is from a live stream. Oh, I don't even... This wasn't during a live stream. This is the day after a live stream. That said, just want to support. So thank you, Panolian, for sending in a Streamlabs donation post live stream. Very kind of you. I don't know if you're watching this, but that's very kind of you. And thank you for the Streamlabs donation from... well, it's a long ID. I'm not going to read the ID out, but... After the Cods conquer all of Westeros in the Winds of Winter, who do you think Lucas Cod will marry to secure the future of the dynasty? Okay, well, that's Merlin. So thank you for the Cod-related super chat, Merlin, you nutcase. Okay, of course, naturally, when the Cods conquer Westeros, who should left-hand Lucas Cod marry? I mean, naturally, he needs... You know, if we're talking about a rock wife, right, mainland Westeros, what's a house that has a fish sigil that isn't an Iron Islands house? We've got the Tullys. Of course, there aren't really any remaining female Tullys that we know of, in the main line at least, with the name Tully. So I guess Mooton. Is there a Mooton lass? Because they have a red salmon. So I'm going to say Mooton. Left-hand Lucas Cod will marry into House Mooton. The silver cod and the red salmon will unite, and Westeros will tremble before the fish. The coat of arms of their kids will be like a silver mixed with pink. A silver mixed with red, so it'll be like a pinkish fish monstrosity. Thank you for the super chat from MF, who says, I know I'm a bit late, but what if Rhaenys was still alive when I think you wrote Meager, but I think you mean Maegor. When Maegor usurped the throne. Um. Well, what? Oh, that rain. I got so confused for a second because there were so many fucking Rhaenys, and I was like, oh yeah, obviously that Rhaenys. Oh, that's a fun one. So, Aegon's other sister wife, Rhaenys, who was shot down in Dawn. What if she was still alive, the mother of King Aenys, and Aenys dies. Rhaenys outlives him. Maegor usurps the throne with Visenya's support, but of course, Rhaenys is going to be on the side of her grandson, Aegon the Uncrowned, the son of Aenys. Oh, that's interesting. And of course, they both have dragons, so, you know, she'll be quite old, but maybe she'll still ride that dragon. Maybe she can ride Meraxes into battle against Balerion, ridden by Maegor. Okay. I don't know if that, again, a lot of this alternate history, like, I don't know if it's juicy enough. I don't know if there's, like, enough to extrapolate from it without it kind of just being purely fan fiction, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay, I think I'm gonna wrap up now. I need some food, and on the Patreon we're gonna be a couple of hours or so. We're gonna be doing Halloween, A Song of Ice and Fire, Jeopardy on the voice chat. So, hey, if any of you interested, signing up to the Patreon Discord, exclusive videos, art commissions, video cameos, all that good stuff. Feel free to support the channel that way. But if not, subscribe if you're not subscribed. Check out my cooking video if you haven't already, because, you know, it's doing okay with views, but it kind of flopped, which I expected, because cooking video, that's not really my thing, and the audio's not great, but there we go. Yeah, feel free to check that out, and stay tuned. More live streams. I keep promising that, and then I'm not good with it, but I want to be more consistent with my live streams, and I need to find a way to animate every Frey 40-minute video as soon as possible without it taking months, or otherwise my channel will collapse. So we'll try and make that work. But there we go. I hope you enjoyed this reading. Hope you enjoyed the spookiness. I need some food. So take care, everyone, and happy Halloween.